Welcome to the third in a series of hustings that we've done. I'm going to hand over in just a moment to Mary Gregory, who's been the person who's put the work into organising this, and she'll say a few more words. My name is Crispin Pailing. I'm from Liverpool Parish Church, and we have hosted this alongside Worldwide Wednesday and also the European movement Merseyside, and it's the third in a series of hustings that we've had. And Mary, I'm going to hand over to you now just to say a few words about what has been like organising it. You can share your frustrations with us if you want, and also just tell us about the next Worldwide Wednesday talk next, the next one coming up.
Thank you very much, Crispin. Well, as he says, it's the third in our trilogy of hustings. I say it's a trilogy. It's felt like an epic throughout. Trying to nail jelly to the wall is nothing by a comparison of trying to pin down a politician. I can tell you that. As the organiser, I have contacted each and every candidate standing. I've tried through their parties, I've tried through their own personal Twitter pages, websites, you name it, I've tried. And in the end, I managed to get each and every one so that we could be fair and even-handed with everything. A number of them have remained elusive until the very, very end, with two sets of apologies for this evening sent from David Newman of the Lib Dems and Jade Marsden of the Conservative candidate. David, apparently, it was a last-minute thing. He's sent his apologies in. And Jade, she apologised right at the very beginning and said she wouldn't be able to make it. We did have the Green candidate, and we may
he might be here. So Gary has joined.
Has a Gary just joined?
But there's no surname, so I don't know if it's that Gary.
Well, that'll be him, I think. Is it Gary?
There we go. Hello, Mary.
Oh,
hello.
Wonderful. Great.
There we go. Hello, Ray. I thought this was 7 o'clock.
No, it was start at 15:15 for us to get our technicalities sorted out. And then we're open to the public from 30:30.
But don't worry,
right,
there now.
There we go.
Mary, carry on, and then we'll get back to the candidates. But thank you, Gary, for joining.
Well, apologies. I was just going to put you with the ones that were missing. So we've got two sets of apologies, as I said, from David Newman of the Lib Dems and from Jade Marsden of the Conservatives. The aim was to be fair to all candidates of whatever political party or political view. But due to the pandemic, the elections have been delayed. We had originally arranged for this to have met in person last year at the Parish Church of St Nicholas, just behind the Liver building. It's Liverpool Parish Church, and Canon Crispin, who is our moderator, kindly offered us the church last year. He's been a wonderful moderator and done a fantastic job over the last 3 weeks. I can't fault him in any way, shape or form. Our group, Worldwide Wednesday, will be back to normal as of next week on the 5th of May, when we will have two world-class journalists speaking. Tony Connolly of RTE, who no doubt will cover something that will be in the Irish news. Now, Irish news moving on as it does. I'm not going to even comment what that may be. We shall leave that and let him surprise us with that. And Martin Bond, who was formerly a BBC correspondent. He's going to be discussing his latest book, Hitler's Cosmopolitan Bastard, and the ideas which helped to develop the European Union. That is a surprising book that I've only read the synopsis of it, and I really can recommend tuning in and listening. It's a real eye-opener of a story. So, like I say, they're the two speakers for next time, and the full details will be posted via Eventbrite. And I ask you all to bear with us, because you will all get a mail informing you what it's going to be and when it's going to be. So please bear with us on that. So with that, I shall hand over to Crispin.
Thank you very
much. I shall go back into hibernation.
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you for your work on this. And welcome to Steve and to Gary, and thank you for being here today. As Mary said, we've had apologies this evening, although all candidates were invited. So apologies came through from David Newman, the Liberal Democrat candidate, and from Jade Marsden, the Conservative Party candidate. But we've got Steve Rotheram from the Labour Party and Gary Cargill from the Green Party. We're going to follow the pattern that we've done in previous weeks, which is to give each candidate a platform for 5 minutes to speak and outline a manifesto. In previous weeks, I've given a sort of 30-second warning as we come to the end of that 5 minutes. There are only two of you, so I want to be a little more relaxed with the way I moderate, but I will ask you to play fair with that one. So what I'll probably do is just say when 5 minutes are up, and then just play with the timing. But I'm not going to throw in any huge guillotines until you get to at least 6 minutes. So I'm going to take you in alphabetical order to start with. That's what I've done every other week. Now, the fact there are only two of you means that really there's a 50-50 chance either way anyway, except that one of you has a surname beginning with a C. And so, Gary, I'd like to invite you first to speak for about 5 minutes. I can't actually see you on my screen at the moment, but hopefully as soon as you start talking, you'll suddenly... Oh, I can see you now. There you go. Great. Gary, over to you.
Okay, great. Okay, 5 minutes. Right, well, I'm Gary Cargill, and I'm the Green Party candidate for the Liverpool City Region Metro Mayor elections in May. I was born in Liverpool. I was brought up in the city region, educated in our schools, socialised as a kid in our community centres and youth groups. It's an incredibly special part of our world, and you know it continues to play an incredibly special part in my life. Not least because in 2018, something incredibly magical happened to me, a life-changing event. I become a father for the first time. I become a dad. And with that, I began to creatively imagine what the world might look like for my son, Joe, when he's my age, what the world might look like for Joe's children. And it's a very bleak picture indeed. We are just 20 years into this century, and we've had 19 of the hottest years on record. Now, I'm sure we've all seen Sir David Attenborough's heartfelt pleas to the UN, urging the world to get our carbon footprints and budgets in order now, because now he believes we are at a tipping point from which there may be no return. And like him, I too believe that the next 10 years are very possibly the most important in the history of humankind. And as a city region, we stand together upon a very dangerous precipice. And so now, in the midst of a climate crisis declared in our region by every single council, I have a calling to create change, to create environmental security, to deliver social justice, to inspire economic success in a society where everybody has the opportunities to thrive. I know in my heart that better is possible, but now, more than ever, we need to change how we do things. We need to change how we live. We need to re-examine who we are, where we've come from, where we are going, and what we need. The environment is in crisis. You know, our economy is in crisis. Our local politics has been racked by scandal and crisis. We are living through a health crisis, a global pandemic, and nobody, not here, not in Whitehall, not anywhere, truly knows the extent of the pain that is to come, the damage that has been reaped upon every sector of our business community. You know, I fear, as I know we all do, that it may be potentially much worse than any of us dare imagine. We are the Green Party. We are member-led from the bottom up, not top down. We are a party of the people. We believe in protecting the poorest and most vulnerable in our society, in line with the needs of our beautiful but fragile planet. And in these unique times, I make a call for us all to unite on the common ground that defines us and not the differences that divide us. As your Green Metro Mayor, I want our people to have a strong, powerful voice in the new society that we will seek to shape together. Because together, we must stand tall and proud as one unified city region, united and determined in creating a just and equal society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. And yes, our future economic success is vital to that vision, but defined under the terms of equality, of social justice, making sure that our politics is open and transparent, that our people are active players in our politics and have a strong political voice. The people of our Liverpool City region are incredible. We have a deep well of spiritual resilience, fortitude and strength, and I want to tap into the unique strengths of our people, our inventiveness, our expertise, our spirits of solidarity and cooperation. I have a total and unshakable faith in the strengths of our city region, our biggest strength being our people itself. Now, our immediate future will be challenging, to say the least, but if we can unite together in a spirit of cooperation and community for the common good, we can sail our ship through tempestuous economic storms to come, through potentially violent and uncharted economic waters, forging strong relationships where we keep each other abreast of every single little change in wind direction. I'll do everything I can to give our people what they need to bring prosperity and economic success back to our shores, to our businesses, and to the communities that we all love. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was dead on 5 minutes, and I didn't even say it. So that's a challenge to you, Steve. So thank you, Gary Cargill from the Green Party and Steve Rotheram from the Labour Party. Over to you for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Crispin. Look, let's face it, the last few weeks have been really disappointing for anyone who's interested in democracy, not just with the Cala report into the problems within Liverpool City Council and the sleaze and cronyism exposed at the heart of our national government, but also with the disregard, and we've seen it again tonight, for the 1.6 million people in our city region demonstrated by candidates in this contest. Despite the fact that I'm still running the Combined Authority, a £1 billion organisation, until May the 6th at least, I've made myself available to take part in all of the hustings scheduled to date. And that's because I believe in scrutiny and accountability. But on every occasion so far, at least one of the other candidates has withdrawn, often at the last minute, leading to some of the events being cancelled altogether. Now, during those few occasions that have actually gone ahead, with the reduced number taking part or substitutes being present, we've seen undeliverable packages, uncosted pipe dreams, and undeniable confusion over the role candidates believe that they're standing for. Indeed, two of them are so confident of success that they're also standing as local councillors, but insist that they're confident of becoming the next Metro Mayor. The public deserves someone who will dedicate all of their efforts into representing the people in every part of our city region. And that's what I've done for the last 4 years. And it's what I'll continue to do if I am re-elected. During that first term, I successfully balanced the needs of ordinary people, of businesses large and small, of third sector and faith organisations, and environmental issues, to build an economy that's more globally competitive, socially inclusive, and environmentally responsible. That hard work was starting to bear fruit, as pre-pandemic, we were the fastest growing city region in the whole country. But the last 12 months have been the most difficult in all of our lives. Throughout the pandemic, I've worked with government when it was in our interest to do so. But I've also taken on Boris Johnson and his government to win more funding, to support our businesses and our local authorities, improve, test, trace and isolate, roll out mass testing and vaccination hubs, access important scientific data to target interventions, win concessions on self-isolation payments, and people should remember this, to secure a proper furlough scheme for our workers. But I haven't just waited for government intervention. I've been proactive in trying to assure business survival in our area. And we've invested more than £40 million as a CA to keep the local economy afloat. And we've put together exciting plans to help the city region recover when things do eventually return to normal. On the 6th of May, we need to elect a mayor with a strong record of standing up for our area, of winning funding from government, of working with businesses, of representing those excluded, marginalised and discriminated against. And that's me. Since being elected in 2017, I've secured more than £200 million in extra funding for transport projects, delivered over 9,000 new jobs, supported more than 5,500 apprenticeships, contracted out £100 million plus in adult education budget, introduced a housing first approach to tackling homelessness. I set up the Fairness and Social Justice Advisory Board, and I launched Merseyside Power, one of the largest renewable energy projects in the whole country. As Metro Mayor, my number one priority has always been to stand up for everyone in every part of our great city region. I'm not just a pro-business mayor, I'm a pro-good business mayor, and I'm a pro-worker mayor too. I've already introduced things like a fair employment charter in partnership with the TUC, and I'll use our inclusive growth strategy to encourage employers to sign up to the aims of the charter, making workplaces healthy, fair, inclusive and just. It's not a utopian dream to believe that things can be better. We first need to give hope to our young people, an opportunity for all. We can build a fairer, more socially just society that works for the many, not just the few. And I'm looking forward to implementing the exciting manifesto that I've put forward if I'm re-elected on May the 6th. Thanks, Crispin.
Thank you very much. Now, with only two candidates with us, it does allow us to get a slightly different dynamic if people attending this would like to take part particularly through the chat function. So if we would gather together physically, this could be very interactive with people from the floor and candidates debating with each other. It's far more difficult to do that on an online setting, but what we can do is use the chat function. So please, as I ask the questions which have been submitted, and I'll ask the questions to each candidate in turn. If you've got something you want to say or chip in, stick it into the chat. The candidates can see it, or I'll mention it, and we'll look for each response to be sort of two or 3 minutes, and no more than that. But if you could put your questions in, and I'm going to start with the questions which have been submitted in advance, but we might have some time to take some of those. I can see one has just come in now. So, but we're going to start, and I'm going to ask Steve this first question actually, and it's going to be about transport, and it is about your views. It is, what are the candidates' views regarding the east-west rail connections and HS2? Will HS2 actually deliver? And actually, as questions are coming in, and perhaps if you could try and stick to about 2 minutes in your answer, then we might have time for more questions at the end. So Steve, across to you for about 2 minutes on your views on east-west rail connections and whether HS2 will actually deliver.
I would prefer to call it west-east connectivity. And the reason is I have this one with Lord Prescott. It needs to start in the Liverpool City region. It doesn't need to start in Hull. It needs to start here. And the reason is because we are now a really strategically important port city for UK PLC. And we can't wait 5, 6, 7, 10 years plus until we get proper connectivity that will enable us to take freight off the roads and put it onto rail. So we need two things. We need additional capacity, and that is provided with not HS2, by the way. HS2 is a slightly different thing. That's north-south, but it's Northern Powerhouse Rail. The thing about Northern Powerhouse Rail, which I fully support, is that it needs to be connected in something called compatibility to HS2. So if HS2 makes its way north, then we'll spare off it to do the first leg of Northern Powerhouse Rail, but also to connect us north-south. So we get a double hit, and that means that the business case, the BCR, starts to stack up. But people talk about expansion of the Port of Liverpool. Unless we get more capacity, we will see that corridor, the freight corridor at the moment, Dunningsbridge Road, continue to be clogged up even more with the poor air quality, asthma, and all of the health implications of that. So we need the government to work with us. The one thing I have said, Crispin, is that I'm not going to accept a cheap and nasty option for Northern Powerhouse Rail. The government want to put us onto the old Fiddler's Ferry rail route, and that was to service a power station. And I'm not accepting that. We want a brand new twin track line from Liverpool going to the Delta and then on to Greater Manchester, and that then goes on to obviously Leeds, etc. That's what we've asked for with government. That's what I've told the Secretary of State. I won't accept anything less, and if they want my support, we're not going to accept a cheap and nasty option, because the South wouldn't, London wouldn't, and if it's good enough for them down there, it's good enough for us up here.
And I've got to ask, do you think HS2 is going to reach us? Because every time they give the plans, the idea of the North seems to fall a little bit shorter than other people's idea of the North. Do you think it's going to get to us?
There's two reviews going on, as you know, and we've been part of it. It looks likely that if anything's in real danger, it's the eastern leg. So it's the bit up to sort of Sheffield and goes on to Newcastle. I do think that they'll probably get to Manchester, and that's because, in previous years, Manchester has been the favoured son or daughter of a Tory government, and that's why we've had to work with the government to try and change perceptions of what's happening here. So HS2 in itself will not come to Liverpool, but a spare from HS2 would give us that connectivity for both north-south and west-east.
Gary, I'm going to ask the same question of you about the east-west or west-east rail link and HS2. Do you think it's going to deliver? How are they going to connect up? Do you think it's good for us?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we absolutely should be connecting to, all the other Northern Powerhouse regions. Absolutely. So in terms of the west-east, east-west, then yeah, I mean, getting to Manchester sometimes on a train from Liverpool can be a problem, and we definitely need to the interconnectedness between the Northern Power cities and the northern regions is absolutely something that I would support. In terms of HS2, well, I mean, as a party, we are against HS2. We believe the priority should be the connecting of communities of the Liverpool City region with each other and with surrounding areas of northern England. And we believe that HS2 is something of a destructive vanity project, and that rather than empowering our city region and the north generally, the actual result will be to maintain London's disproportionate economic influence over the rest of the country. And that's before we get into, the destruction of ancient woodlands and vital green spaces across the centre of the country. So, I mean, if elected, I would use my influence to call for the project to be called in for a re-evaluation of its economic and environmental costs and claim benefits. The costs, I mean, they continue to spiral out of control, and as part of the claim benefits, I think we should look at the huge growth of virtual meetings since COVID world, for starters. I I mean, how many people are going to be traveling to London for all of our meetings in the future? We need to be shifting power out of London, I would say, into our regions, and especially if we need to improve our, if we're going to improve our political processes and decision making. The greatest number of people, I think, are likely to benefit from improved local and regional transport links. And similarly, if we were planning a high capacity freight route, I mean, would you send it via London, or would you create an improved network covering a greater number of communities? So, I mean, that's where we stand on it, you know, and we certainly believe the HS2 is absolutely a destructive vanity project. It's ripping up the greenbelt all over the place, and it's, you know, people are receiving compulsory purchase orders for their homes. So, you know, as a party and as a mayor, I absolutely would oppose HS2.
So I'd like to stay with transport actually, and obviously as you answer, do come back on each other's comments as well. But let's talk about free ports, because transport, freight, all these words have come up, and I'll ask you, Gary, because it follows on from what you've just said, whether you support the proposal that we should have a free port here in Liverpool City region, and whether you think actually a free port would be good, would it create jobs, or whether you think that a free port would just bring lorries to the region.
Well, no, I mean, no, we don't support free ports at all. We think free ports are really bad on lots of levels, largely because, well, I mean, if we are, I mean, we in general as people, we all pay our taxes, and what a free port does is a free port is you know, it's a tax-free zone, isn't it? It's basically it's designed for, you know, to try and create like a tax-free zone that's going to improve business in one particular area. So, I mean, we're against free ports on loads of counts. The TUC have come out against free ports as well. They've cited free ports as a massive worry in terms of watering down workers' rights. They called it a Trojan horse. So I think at a time of great economic instability, free ports is something that I don't think we can support, and I absolutely will oppose. What was the question related to?
Well, really, it's about free ports, whether you think it's a good idea. And I think you've answered that quite comprehensively. Steve, over to you. Free ports, is this a good idea? Do you support the free port? Do you think it would be good for the region, or just bring lorries?
Yeah, just to correct something, the TUC aren't opposed to free ports. They're opposed to the watering down of workers' rights, and so am I. And so I've raised my concerns about environmental protections, about statutory responsibilities, and all sorts of things that we're yet to see the full details of. But actually, the unions are part of the process to date, and also are going to be sitting on the board of the new free port, or in the management board that sits under the actual board, and that's to keep an eye on things, and quite rightly so. That is their prerogative and what they should be doing. I've expressed genuine concerns about the lack of real detail from central government on what free port status is. It is not the same as the free port that previously had its status in Sefton, by the way, but at the port of Liverpool. It's a completely different concept, and it's a number of different sites. So there are 4 sites within the Liverpool City region, for instance, and we are still investigating whether it's the right thing for us. The one thing I'd say about Gary's approach to most of these things, and it's really surprising to hear that in just a few weeks he's changed his mind on NPR, because we've got the video of a previous Hustings where Gary was opposed to Northern Powerhouse Rail, and now he's just said that he's in favour of it. But the real difficulty about these sorts of things is that if you oppose everything, then you're never going to be able to achieve some of the things that you need to achieve. And we all know that we need to get freight off the roads. We can save 180 million HGV miles a year by opening up the rail links that will take that freight onto rail and off our roads. So you can't keep opposing everything. Some things you have to support. And again, Gary's on record as saying that he's no big fan, if you like, of economic growth. Well, without economic growth, we will see the progress that we've made to try to catch up in the Northwest, but to the rest of the country, wither on the vine. We need economic growth, and we need greater economic growth in the Liverpool City region to get back to our rightful place as a preeminent and important place for UK PLC. And that's what I'll continue to do. I'll take decisions that are in the interests of the widest constituency of the Liverpool City region. But of course, by balancing that against those environmental, ecological, and other considerations.
Thank you. So I'm going to come back to an environmental question a bit later, but let's stick with the finances. And know, Gary, that Steve has just summarised how he sees your policies. So I'm going to give this question to you first, because then you can pick up any of the themes. But it's about finance, it's about jobs, it's about the economy. And at the moment, we have in Liverpool the 8th highest claimant rate for unemployment related benefits. That's at 8.9% of the working age population. And just a question I've already got prepared, but I want to pick up from the chat. And those of you who put in questions in the chat, I do want to come to as many as possible, so keep putting them in. But Paul in the chat has said that he'd like some precise examples of how you would help entrepreneurs create and grow businesses with the associated jobs and wealth. And that sort of connects to the question which I was going to ask, is how would you create a sustainable employment strategy for the region? These are all interlinked, but I want to give you a chance on that first, Gary, because you may want to pick up some of the issues in Steve's last answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, I will come back to the Freeport thing, but I think from my perspective, an economy that is focused on our people thriving and not just growth is what I was saying. And the GDP figures that Steve was cited, you know, that wealth, a lot of that wealth has stayed in the hands of the few. It hasn't trickled down to the many, and that is just the fact. Our GVA figures tell us that. An economy that's focused on people thriving and not just growth is something that we would like to see. Like it's part of our Green Party policy. The way that we're currently living, we believe, is just not sustainable. Okay, so to believe that we're simply just going to build back stronger or build back better using the same old tired methods, we believe it's just a simple fantasy. We are, as I've mentioned, we're living through a plethora of crisis. Our economy's in crisis, the environment's in crisis. We're living through a health crisis, and it's been this way for so long. And, you know, for too long, I think governments in general have cited GDP figures as a way of citing economic success, when in actual fact, it's not. Everything is kind of just a prefix for the word crisis. And I believe genuinely that we just need to change how we do things. We need to change how we live. We live on a planet of finite resources, and we can't keep consuming at the rate that we are. The recovery needs to be just, it needs to be fair, and it needs to set the potential of our people free. So to do that, I would say we need to develop a holistic approach. So what I would want to do is I want to bring together businesses, education providers, and other stakeholders and change makers to develop a cohesive plan to improve the take-up of adult education and to address the skills need that we have. I mean, we believe in lifelong learning, and there should be real support for adults who get to a certain age and have, you know, an epiphany, a moment of inspiration where they say, you know, there's more to life than this, and I want to do something else. And then they might need the support to get over some of the psychological hurdles that are in the way to stop them kind of retraining later in life. An economy that is focused on people thriving and not just growth is what we'd be looking for. Our GVA figures tell us that there are serious pockets in our city region where people are economically stagnant and they have been left behind. And you know, they'll need help to resolve the very serious gap in their CV, their lack of participation in the labour market. So from my perspective, let's get them training and let's get them the training and development that they need. Looking at the green industrial revolution that seeks to harness the incredible power that we have off our coastline. In terms of getting our businesses moving, well, again, it's that holistic approach. If we look at what Amsterdam have done, and they have a green mayor, by the way, they're the first major European city to have adopted the circular economic model. And what they did at the very start was to get all the change makers in the room. So local businesses, like Federation of Small Businesses, the CBI, the trade unions in, local politicians, national politicians as well, Westminster, representatives from every sector, the charity sector, and as well, you know, the community. So we got them all into a room and they looked at who they were, what their identity was, what they consumed. And they looked at it through 4 different lenses. They looked at it through the local, the global, the social, and then they also looked at it through the environmental. And when they looked at who they were, where they had come from, what they need, what they were consuming, what they were heavy in terms of what their people desired from the markets, it drew a certain picture of who they were and what their needs were as people. And then if they looked at it, the same kind of information through a global lens, and it gave them a picture of what their impact was on the rest of the world. So for example, they could work out what their impact was on people in Bangladesh who were making shirts for people who lived in Amsterdam. And, you know, and that kind of gave them a really good sense of identity of who they were and how they would need to change to move forward. Then they looked at the social, and the social is all of our people should have the things, the basic necessities in life, and that would be food, it would be shelter, it would be water, it would be education, healthcare, social care, political voice, all these things that are, you know, the basic tenets of a socially responsible society. And then the final lens was the environmental. And what that did was it gave them a really good understanding of who they were as people. And from that, they could draw a portrait of the city. They had a deeper understanding of who they were on the inside out. And from there, they knew what their unique selling point was to the world. And then they could develop the one-stop shop so that they could help the small, medium enterprises break the glass ceiling that they inevitably reach after 4 years when they max the domestic market and they need to export. And then there are, you know, and the psychological hurdles that come with exportation. So I would like to do that. I would like to do that. And I would like to create a one-stop shop to help those SMEs and everybody else with the kind of legality, the professional experience and the professional advice that they would need that the cost we can't pay for.
Thank you very much. I'd like to come to Steve on that and the original question, although there are issues Gary's raised there, which you may want to bring up, but that original question was around a sustainable strategy for jobs and help, meaningful help for enterprise, SMEs, businesses. How's that in a post-pandemic world? Steve, across to you.
Yeah, I can pick up the germane of the question plus some of the points that Gary's raised. He finished off by talking about getting decision makers in the same room. We've done that. It was called the Economic Recovery Panel, and it had all of the stakeholders and decision makers in the city region all buying in to the same vision. And the reason that we talked about building back better by the way, which was a phrase that myself and Andy Burnham used in a joint press conference to describe what we wanted to do in a post-pandemic world, which was misappropriated by Boris Johnson, but also used, it has to be said, over in America by Joe Biden. So it has got some good aspects of it. But the reason that we were using something like that is because this is where Gary's right. You can't go from what we've been through over the last 12, 13, 14 months and just return to where we were pre-pandemic and expect that things will change. You know, it's Einstein's theory, isn't it, of insanity, that if you do the same things all the time and expect different results, well, there's the problem. So we don't, and we haven't, and we won't. And the idea was to look at opportunities for us to do things differently. You know, there are some good things that have happened societally that have come out of this period, not of COVID. I don't think anything good's come out of COVID. 150,000 people have lost their lives, and many others are still living with the consequences of long COVID and long tail COVID and all sorts of things. But the very fact that we have seen neighborhoods coming together, we've seen social cohesion, we've seen people helping each other, we've seen the churches and the voluntary community sector coming to the fore. We set up LCR Cares to help a lot of those vulnerable communities. The very fact that I know in my own street more people than I probably did 15, 16 months ago, and I'm the Metro Mayor, but you're all busy lives and you rush around and you'll stop and ask your neighbours, you know, do they want something from the shops? That's what Building Back Better is about. Building Back Better was about not buildings, but approaches. And so there's lots and lots of concrete plans. Look, we're ahead of anywhere, I'd say, in the whole country in regard to community wealth building, inclusive growth. By the way, Gary, these are not hidden. You can read these documents and have a look at what we're doing. So when you talk about some of these things, you can actually see what we're doing. You can challenge if you don't think it's enough, or have a look at what we're doing. People talk about donut economics, about Keynesian principles, about the Preston model. They're looking at what we're doing because we're doing things differently. And so it's not about the sort of Patrick Minford trickle down economics anymore. You know, that whole thing was called into disrepute many years ago. And I had no time for it then. In fact, I wrote a letter in the Echo about it about 20 years ago, 18 years ago. So I've always been against it, but we can do things differently because we need sustainability and we need to look at opportunity. And the green industrial revolution does provide a massive opportunity for us. And I'm sure you'll come on to questions, Crispin, about things around that later. So I won't preempt what might come out of the discussions, but believe me, there's an awful lot of things happening. And just finally, again, Gary wants to do something which is a one-stop shop. It's there. Have a look at what we're doing. It's called the Growth Platform. It's a one-stop shop. It was what I talked about 4 years ago as one front door, where if you've got anything in regard to FDI or an inward investment or businesses that want signposting or support or what, it's all under one roof, and it's called the Growth Platform.
Thank you. And I want to stick with that idea of communities in the next question. We are going to come on to a COP26 question later, so we'll do environment. But as you said, you know more people in the street than you knew before. Gary, I'm going to ask you to answer this question first. That I think one of the things that has happened in the last 12 months, I'm picking up a question from the chat here, and I'm just going to repackage it a little bit, is the focus on inequality, in particular racism and racial inequality within our communities, and that obviously has been a major issue since the death of George Floyd last year, but it's shone a spotlight on what is already the case in our own communities. And so the question to you, which you may have seen in the chat already, is what candidate, what, if you're elected, can you offer in terms of assistance and support to social and criminal injustices which are suffered within the community, and particularly Black and minority ethnic communities? Is it a case of grants to support people? What can you offer to tackle racism and inequality in both the short and long term? Gary, across to you on that one.
To tackle racism and inequality,
and to support the communities who have been the victims of those inequalities.
Yeah, well, I mean, from my perspective, it has to be education. You know, I think education is key. There are still quite a lot of communities that don't have, in the Liverpool City region, that don't have a very big ethnic mix at all. You know, quite a lot of North Liverpool, certainly where I live in Runcorn, it doesn't have a big ethnic mix at all. And so, for me, education is absolutely key to this. Interestingly, the superintendent or the police commissioner who retired, I can't remember his name, and I can't actually remember his position, but I do remember the quote that if he was given £5 billion from the government to tackle crime, he'd spend 4 billion of it on leveling up, you know, the gross inequalities that we have.
Andy Cook, it was, Gary.
Yeah, go on.
It was Andy Cook, the chief constable. He's just retired now.
Yeah,
but he was the chief constable. But you're right; it was a fantastic report that he produced.
Yeah, and for me, if we had all the money in the world, it would be about doing that. It will be about leveling up in that way. But in terms of racism, you know, I think it's really difficult if we don't have that kind of ethnic melting pot that other communities have, and so, you know, education is key, and also and just making sure that we have an open door in positions of leadership, positions of power, to anyone who feels as if that they are, you know, suffering in some way from prejudice, from racism, and that they can't get on, and the world is unequal, and there are no solutions to them. That, you know, that there is somewhere that they can go and they can kind of communicate those, not necessarily the police or the police and crime commissioner, which is what we have here. I know Steve would probably like more powers over the last few years in terms of the police crime commissioner, but which we have here, which, for example, Andy doesn't have in Manchester. He has more powers that way, and so, yeah, for me, it will be about education. It will be about leveling up from that route.
Thank you. A good, clear answer there. Steve, on that one, support for communities who are experiencing racism and prejudice.
Yeah, we've got a race equality commission, and it did stem from what happened with George Floyd and other instances. And they've reported back, and quite clearly we need to do an awful lot more. So we've looked specifically at now allocating a proportion of combined authority funding so that we can tackle some of the inbuilt and institutionalized racism and discrimination that's existed in our society, in the Liverpool City region, for generations. And I'm somebody that I used to think that it was enough for me not to be racist. And then I started to get involved in anti-racism, and I thought that I was doing my bit. And then I realized that none of that's good enough unless you actually try to stop racism itself. I mean, I was on the streets when Tommy Robinson came here, and Gary's just mentioned about some of the constituencies, which he's right, are some of the least ethnically diverse communities in the whole country. In fact, Knowsley, out of 650 constituencies, it's the least ethnically diverse of all. And Tommy Robinson went there, and he went to stir up the white working class in that area. And we went and we were attacked, physically attacked, obviously verbally attacked, threatened with all sorts of things. The police weren't there at the time. Me and my son were literally facing a throng of racists. And it brings it home to you, the sort of things that certain people who may well have a different colour skin than me have to face on a daily basis. We have to change the structural inequalities and discrimination and naked racism in our area. And so we're going to target some funding. We already have given £2.5 million to Blackburn House. Everybody will know it. Fantastic facility. And that can do an awful lot. We've worked through the women's organisation and through others in Liverpool 8. I support Mandela 8. And we've given them money to run some of their educational programmes, because Gary's right, a lot of it does start there. But actually what we want is some of the black businesses. We want black entrepreneurs. We want black women and people from all corners of our communities to have a fair chance to reach their full potential, to act as the role models for other people tomorrow, to stand on their shoulders. And that's what we're doing in the city region. And, you know, Lorna Rogers is doing an unbelievable job for us. And we're trying to bring together, because there were a number of different strands, trying to bring it all together. But we are determined, and we have a plan to address the problems that we can all now see because of horrible things that have happened once again. We can't let this time pass, because I guess what's going to happen in 10 years' time, something else will occur, and people will say, well, what did they do last time? We're not going to miss this opportunity.
Thank you. I'm aware that we advertise this for an hour. We're going to overrun by a few minutes, but not too many, because you might have other things to get on with. You might have another 10 hustings to do this evening. But I'm going to focus on just two more questions before we finish. Others are coming into the chat, and I'm sorry if we can't come to them all. The first one, which would be great if we could answer briefly, and then I'm going to finish on the environmental one. But the first one is about the relationship between the city mayor and the combined authority mayor. It's come up in the chat, the question, and I'm going to ask a different question from the one in the chat, and it's a twofold question. One, how do you think that the two different areas, the two different responsibilities should interact with each other? Where is the boundary between Metro Mayor and City Mayor? And secondly, in the past, it's often been said, rightly or wrongly, that there's been a divergence between the two, and it's all about personalities. We're definitely going to have a new city mayor. Well, I can't comment on the outcome of the Metro Mayor election, but how would you make it different in the future? So one is about boundaries and how you see the boundaries between those two roles, bearing in mind that in Manchester, Gary's already said, it's different over police and crime commissioner and areas like that, and it's different there, some of the responsibilities, some of the way it's carved out. But how do you see those boundaries? And secondly, new personalities, how is it going to be different in the future? Steve, I need to ask you that one first, and then we're going to come to Gary on it.
Yeah, thanks. Hospital pass. I suppose the way it should work is that the Mayor of Liverpool is just one of 6 leaders in the city region, and whether you're the leader of a council or the mayor of a city, it shouldn't be any different to what the function of the combined authority is and needs to be. And there is a very, very clear delineation of responsibilities. And where do the boundaries start and stop? Well, councils do what councils have already done. Devolution was about top-down devolution, not bottom-up. So in other words, none of the powers that councils previously had have been lost. What the whole devolution agenda is about is we live in the most centralized democracy in the OECD, and we have the most unbalanced economy in the whole of Europe. And devolution gives you the chance to rebalance, to redress the imbalance in that. And so we take power away from Whitehall and Westminster, where, as you know, I used to reside as a member of Parliament. We take power away from the centre and not from local authorities. So it's us taking decisions instead of Whitehall mandarins, instead of people who can't point to where Gary lives in Halton on a map, that struggle to find out where Liverpool is on a map, who don't understand the north-south divide, who haven't got a clue about how communities in our area work and operate and function. So they are very different, Crispin, and I know the confusion has been because people said we've got a mayor and a spare and all that sort of stuff. I'm very aware of the tensions that existed between me and the former mayor, and there was a divergence. And what I tried to do is to ensure that what we do was absolutely scrupulous, and that was borne out by the fact that in Parliament, the Secretary of State specifically mentioned me and the combined authority that I run as saying that none of Cala in any way was, that wasn't in any way part of what we do. So I do think there's a very clear line between the different functions.
Thank you. Gary, over to you. Something about the boundaries between those two mayoral roles, and something about the personalities and how you feel, if elected, you'd work with the whoever is elected as city mayor.
Well, I mean, like, you know what, I do think it is confusing. It's a, as Steve quite rightly says, it's a job title. He's the leader of the council, isn't he? The city mayor. That's what he is. Just as, you know, in Holland we have a leader of the council here in Rob Polhill. And that's it. But it's confusing, and I don't think it helps. I don't think it's helped the Metro Mayor at all. Just the title city mayor. I don't think it's helped in the least. I think it's brought confusion, and there is. I do think there's an issue of visibility with the role of the Metro Mayor. There seems to be an issue of visibility, and I don't think it's helped by the fact that we have this title city mayor. I don't know Joe Anderson. I don't know him. Never worked with him, so I can't comment on the change in dynamic or anything like that because I've not been in the position. So, but what I can say is that, you know, I think our politics needs to open up. It needs to be broadened, and I would make a complete and absolute pledge to work with anyone on those on common grounds, from any party, of any colour, of any tribe. You know, I think we need to come together under the things that kind of bind us, that, you know, that we are united on, rather than finding the things that, you know, that we're constantly in conflict over. It's absolutely pointless having any relationship with anyone drawn on tribal grounds. It has to be about common grounds and the common good. And in the name of the common good, I'd make an absolute pledge to work with anyone, to be open, to be listening, to be honest, and to do the very best I can in the interests of the people of the Liverpool City region. And that's the best I can say, because I don't have that dynamic, I don't have that working relationship.
All right, no, thank you very much. I'm going to move to our last question now. I'm aware that there are questions in the chat which we haven't been able to pick up. Some really interesting questions, particularly around a couple have come in about the status of EU citizens in the region at the moment and their participation in democracy in the future. We really haven't got time, I'm afraid, to answer that one. Similarly, some questions came in by email which were quite specific around areas in in the region, and there's one about Garston and some of the issues facing there. I haven't picked that one out because I wanted to keep it general for the whole region, so I apologise if your question hasn't been asked, but there are other ways in which you can interact with the candidates. If nothing else, just tweet them and see how they reply. But I'd like to finish with a question on the environment. There have been a couple of questions asked about this. One is very specific, and it's about greenbelt land. And it is to say that, what are your thoughts on the amount of greenbelt land being earmarked for warehousing, and whether the use of greenbelt land is being for development is actually meeting the promises that are being made. And the other question, and so feel free to pick that up, but I think the bigger question which I'd like to ask you is, how are you, if you are elected, going to bring the principles and outcomes of COP26 to the Liverpool City region? Gary, I think you deserve to take that one first. It's the word green in the party title that does it.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so in terms of building on green belts, I mean, I think it's really obvious. I say absolutely not to that. You know, we know to building on green belts. We have precious green space, and I think, if anything that's emerged from COVID-19, it's just how important our green spaces are to our people, to our mental, to our physical well-being. So often, so many people have escaped, you know, the lockdown, the pressures and strains of daily life, and have escaped, you know, into our parks, into our green spaces, be they official green belts or not, you know. And I think they just need to be protected at all costs, and I'll do everything I can to do that. I think there's around about 800 brownfield sites that could be primed and earmarked for developments, and so, as a policy, from our perspective, it is always brownfield first and not greenfield. And in terms of COP26, well, I think we need to have a really clear carbon reduction pathway, a plan for the Liverpool City region to get to net zero carbon status. Now, we want to do that by 2030. The Labour Party want to do it by 2040, but we don't believe that we've got time to waste. We believe it's an escalating crisis. And if we can create a credible carbon reduction pathway that we can present at COP26, then, you know, there are fantastic opportunities for us to stand tall, especially with some of the abundance of power, natural power that we have off our coastline. I mean, we are so blessed geographically with an abundance of natural power off our coastline here in the Liverpool City region. The Liverpool, the River Mersey, the Liverpool Bay area, it's got some of the strongest, some of the most powerful tidal forces in the Western world. There's a 10-meter disparity between its high tide and its low tide. And then we've got coastal winds, and a lot of other regions don't have that. They don't have that in West Yorkshire. They don't have that in Manchester. And if we can harness that power, then, you know, it makes us incredibly rich and abundant indeed. And so, you know, that would be my plan, would be to create a really credible carbon reduction pathway that we can present that gets us there quickly, and also harnessing some of the power that we have off our natural coastline, very clear energy pathways. If we can harness the natural tides that we have, we know that we can light up the city region for 100 years and more with clean, green, renewable energy. And that's how I would want to present ourselves, as well as an outward internationalist, forward-facing city ready to take on the environmental crisis and the economic recovery that will need to happen as we transition into the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Steve, across to you the same question. I'm going to guess that you remember it, but I'll repeat it if you want.
I can remember it. In regard to the brownfield sites, for instance, that's a register that was compiled by the Combined Authority under my instruction when I first walked in, because I've always believed that wherever possible, you should build on brownfield first. But you'll know that I'm a former builder, and I know that the major costs of construction are swallowed up by what happens under the ground, the stuff that you can't see. And that's why brownfield sites are often not the preferred alternative from developers. So we need to make them commercially viable. And I've secured funding from central government to do that. So we, next year, we're going to spend £22 million on remediation of brownfield sites so that they can then be developed, and we can get some of that growth and some of the housing and other things that we need on brownfield. Also, it's about the type of things that you build on it. And I've got Paul Monaghan, who's a Sterling Prize winning architect, who's a Scouser, did well for himself, works in London in an architectural practice. They've actually got the gig for the new Houses of Parliament. That's how big his practice is. He's coming back and helping and assisting as my design champion. So we're trying to build in. In regard to COP, again, because of the uncertainty of whether it was going to go ahead as it was in Glasgow, whether it's going to be a virtual event, there was a bit of a hiatus. But during that time, we've been working with Alok Sharma, who's the president of COP26, who's invited us as the Northwest to come along and exhibit some of the things we're doing, because, again, out of the whole country, the Northeast can compete on some of this, but nowhere near to the extent that we're doing it. So on hydrogen, for instance, and Gary will tell you that there's 3 types of hydrogen, and this isn't green hydrogen. He's right. At this moment in time, it's not green hydrogen, but it's better than the alternative that we're currently using, which is fossil fuel. So on hydrogen, we've got hydrogen train manufacture, not very far from where Gary is, actually in Alston. And that was funded, partly funded through money from the Combined Authority. We've got hydrogen capture and storage, and also some of the hydrogen is going into Caden HyNet's network, and they're going to trial that in St Helens to see what percentage they can burn without affecting all of the appliances and the elements and all that sort of stuff. So we're trialing that. Also, in St Helens, they've got some government funding and our funding for a project called Glass Futures. And I think it's a terrible title. I think it's really awful. But basically what it is because glass needs, the raw materials need to burn at such incredible temperatures, electricity won't do that. So they're going to use hydrogen and see whether they can get the same temperatures and trial that for energy intensive industries. And if it works, it can roll out. I think that's about £20 million is going into the likes of that. But we're also doing hydrogen in transport locally. We've got hydrogen buses coming hopefully before the end of this year on the network in the Liverpool City region. And we want to see whether there are other applications, because we're building some of the network that we'll need for hydrogen. It's a bit, at this moment, a bit like Betamax and VHS. Nobody's really certain which one will win. Is it electricity or is it hydrogen? It could be both in this occasion. So we're going to trial both on our buses. And we've got a bus with a pantograph on that can recharge in 15 minutes when, if you have a look, I've got my phone on charge now, and that takes about 3 or 4 hours. So I don't get it that a huge bus can do it. We're using battery technology on our trains to go to Kirby's Headboat Lane. 66 million quid we're investing in that. 500 million pounds in green transport. The most sophisticated and cleanest fleet in the whole country. So we're doing an awful lot of stuff on transport. On wind in Barebow Bank, we think we can treble the output in Barebow Bank, and we'll be able to, by doing all these things, we'll be able to double the number of green jobs. There's solar farms. Again, there's one that I opened with Rob Polhill, because Gary mentioned them, in Halton. There's also solar panels, and we need to be looking at whether through what we're doing, although we don't have all of the responsibilities for planning, that still sits with local authorities, but whether we can persuade planners to look at solar panels and building solar panels on roofs and stuff like that. There's heat transfer systems, and then there's tidal. And people will know about tidal, but just to say, when I was a kid, people, literally in short kecks, people spoke about tidal, about the Mersey barrier, Mersey barrage. This is not that, but it is harnessing the power of the River Mersey, and we'll be able to power to find the energy for up to 1 million homes in the Liverpool City region, and that will be a game changer because we will own part of the energy output, and that's why it's so important to all of our futures.
Thank you very much. There's so much more we could say about that, and I apologise that it ended up being the last question, and we haven't even talked about buses in detail, other than hydrogen buses. We're going to come to an end now. I want to give you both a final chance, which I'm going to bring down to just 60 seconds each. I'm going to go in reverse alphabetical order, which means be Steve and then Gary, just to give us a 60-second takeaway before the elections, which are next week. And so people are beginning to drop off now. So let's pack this in. Steve, just give us 60 seconds as a final word from you.
I'm going to try and see if I can answer as many questions as I possibly can. Bus prices are ridiculous. Yes, they are. And that's why we're looking to franchise buses to bring them back into public control. London style integrated transport system, better for everybody. Somebody's saying the new trains didn't go anywhere, did they? Well, they're ready to be rolled out. It's £500 million worth of brand new trains. So I don't know where that question's coming from. What's Steve done to help people with inflammable cladding problems? Well, I'm part of Merseyside, Liverpool, Gladiators, as well as Greater Manchester. We had a meeting with them all, with the minister responsible, the government minister responsible. They think I'm doing a good job. I've already engaged on their behalf with councils and other people to try and put pressure on those who are responsible for the cladding scandal. But we'll carry on doing that. I'm just trying to see whether devolution of power needs to be accompanied by devolution of funding. That's exactly what we're doing. So we're giving certain pots of money out to neighbourhoods. We've got community environmental projects. We gave £250,000 out for really £500 grants and all that to get that going. And last one on LCR Cares, which nobody mentioned, and I'm disappointed because a lot of your organisations, will have benefited from it. £3 million going to the most vulnerable in society. Not a penny of it would have been found. Only I had the foresight, along with Lynn Collins, to within 24 hours get all of the documentation completed before lockdown was called.
Thank you very much. Gary, final 60 seconds from you.
Okay, well, can I just say that was a very impressive question and answer, 60 seconds. I almost want to give it a round of applause. So, well done. All right, 60 seconds. Listen, it's like this. Steve mentioned it before. We've had a number of hustings cancelled because guess what? The candidates just aren't showing up. Steve hasn't missed one. I haven't missed one. We've been ever present at all of these elections. The Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrat Party have both been empty spaces throughout this campaign, and it's a shame. And the real people who suffer are the people who are going to go out and vote. And to that end, I will say this: at this election, uniquely, it isn't first past the post. You have two votes. You have a first preference vote and you have a second preference vote. Please use them to their full. And I'm going to say this: vote Green as your first preference vote. If you believe in green politics, if you like green, and we say the only way you're going to get green is to vote Green. So there, at this election, please vote Green as your first preference vote. Do whatever you want with the second vote, but as your first preference vote, vote Green. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Gary. So just to remind you that the four candidates for these elections for the Metro Mayor, the Combined Authority Mayor, Liverpool City Region, are Gary Cargill from the Green Party, Jade Marsden from the Conservative Party, David Newman from the Liberal Democrats, and Steve Rotheram from the Labour Party. We've had apologists from two of them this evening, but thank you very much to Gary and to Steve for being here for some really good questions and discussion. This was brought to you by Liverpool Parish Church, by the European Movement Merseyside, and by Worldwide Wednesday. It will be up on the Worldwide Wednesday YouTube channel within about 24 hours. So if you want to see bits of it again, then do have a look at that. And you can also see there the hustings we've done for the last 2 weeks, firstly for the City Mayor and last week for the Police and Crime Commissioner. So on that, my name is Crispin Pailing from Liverpool Parish Church, and thank you for coming along, and good night to you all.